Council meeting to order at 7:30. Susie, can you call roll for that, please?
Councilmember Groves.
Here.
Councilmember Chambers.
Here.
Councilmember Salzweedl.
Here.
Councilmember Yankovic.
Here.
And Mayor DeVore.
Here. Chief.
If I get Officer Shears come forward. How many was it?
Who did that?
Right here.
Oh, right.
If I don't get too,
Right up front.
Stare right at the camera.
if I don't get
For
too
those of you who don't know him,
thumbs
this is Officer Shears, he's been in the department 4 years? 4 years. 4 years. We call him our triple threat. He's a licensed law enforcement. He just completed his EMT school, so he's a licensed paramedic, and he's with Lowell Fire Department. He's certified. They just said that.
Nice.
EMT, and he's also just got off for probation at the fire department, so he knows everything. But the reason we're here tonight to honor him, he was supposed to do his last council meeting, but he was going to firearms instructor school, so he's also got that under his belt, taking that over from me. But the reason we're here tonight is he had a pretty tough year, so we wanted to recognize that. So we were going to award him a meritorious service citation. The Lowell Police Department would like to recognize Officer Shears for his meritorious service during 2022. Officer Shears distinguished himself among his peers for handling unusual, stressful, and dangerous situations. In police jargon, he has become a magnet. You know what I'm talking about, right?
You left a word.
I did. Officer Shears assisting Ione County Sheriff's Department, the City of Ione DPS, and the Michigan State Police spiked a fleeing stolen vehicle on M21, a potentially dangerous, deadly task for any officer. The suspects continued to flee on foot after the car was disabled. Officer Shears and other officers captured all involved and recovered not only the car, but additional stolen property. Officer Shears responded alone to a suicide attempt. The victim had severely injured themselves with a knife and locked themselves in their house. Officer Shears was alone to deal with the family, the potentially dangerous subject, and the bystanders. He maintained his cool, got the subject's family to safety, was able to break into the house, injuring himself in the process, subdue the critically injured subject, and get them to medical care. Responding to a well-being check, Officer Shears had contact with a subject who had verbalized wanting to harm himself. The subject turned on Officer Shears, jumping on his back and began choking him. Officer Shears, relying on his training, dropped his chin, retrieved his taser, and was able to remove the subject and create distance. Showing great restraint and without using undue force, was able to take the suspect into custody and turn him over to medics for evaluation. Officer Shears is commended for his ability to work in a dangerous situations with potentially violent people, keeping his composure, relying on his wits and training, and bring a volatile situation to a safe conclusion. He is an example of cool under fire. Congratulations.
What, no speech?
All right, how about a motion for the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll support.
Discussion or changes? Sue?
Councilmember Groves.
Yes.
Mayor DeVore.
Yes.
Councilmember Salzweedl.
Yes.
Councilmember Yankovic.
Yes.
And Councilmember Chambers.
Yes.
Citizen discussion.
Perry Beecham, reside at 924 Riverside Drive. A couple things I just want to mention, talk about. Richards Park, Dan, I think it was your DPW guys. I've noticed you drive by there a lot, and I noticed how nice the park looks and the trees are all trimmed up and everything. And they did a fantastic job of maintaining Richards Park, and if you just pass that along, I appreciate it. The branch pickup, the city, along with Light and Power, and I believe it was Mike Burns and the city idea to go around and pick up limbs and everything that were put out by the road. I want to thank the city for that. Some of my neighbors and we, again, living on Riverside Drive, a lot of times branches tend to go over on the bank of the river. So we went along the bank and tried to get as many as we could that were in that size range and got them up to the edge. And today they were up, and I know at my mom's house they've just done a wonderful job of cleaning all that up and just made it simple for the residents of the city. And so again, a thank you for that. The last, maybe not so much a thank you. So in the mail, a lot of citizens have gotten notice for backflow inspections of their house. The company is HydroCore, I believe. I don't know if we hired them or if the state does, but I question a little bit of it. I called them today to schedule, and I scheduled, I'll just put it this way, I scheduled a day to do that. It's a 2-hour block, and I told them if somebody's, you can stop by anytime, if somebody's there, you can, more than glad to have you take a look. But I think it's a burden on the citizens that you have to have somebody of 18 years or older there. I understand that, but again, if a husband and wife, or if they're working or anything, so how do they do that? And the only times that they will do it in their letter is from 8 to 12, and then a period from 12 to 4. I asked them, how long does it take? About 15 minutes. But somebody's got to be there, and they said, no, we don't do 4-hour blocks, it's 2-hour blocks. So I scheduled something from 8 to 10. Again, I'm a small business person, and the mantra is, do whatever it takes to satisfy your customer. And I just don't see that in this HydroCorp, because I'm sure there are other citizens that are working, have jobs, and that time frame is difficult. I meet with customers when it's convenient for the customer, and if it's 6 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock, whatever, that's what I do. And again, I would like to see that the city would look into having to do this. I realize it's a state law that it has to be inspected. I don't have a problem with that. It's just the time frame that somebody, a citizen, has to be there, and they're going, well, can't you get a neighbor or get somebody to be there? And my point being is, so I'm going to ask my neighbor to, you got to come and sit at my house between 8 and 10 and not know when they're going to show up. And I did talk to Marty, and when they had one before, they were supposed to come and inspect his business. They never showed up. So if I asked a neighbor to do, again, I just think the city needs to be aware of that situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Anybody else? Old business number A, downtown parking.
Yep, so I was directed by council to come back, at least come with an idea for if we were to consider 15-minute parking. So I did work, Dan and I did work on this. Basically what I did, and I have I believe 4 maps. Basically just started at Maine, went all the way to Washington. And what I did was I highlighted in orange the middle parking space of all, like if the buildings are connected, I put the building, I put the middle space to be the location if you were to consider 30-minute parking or 15-minute parking, whatever you wanted to do. And I did that all along Main Street, all the way to Washington Street, and wanted to see if this is what you were looking for from us regarding this, and if this is something you still wanted us to consider. We did reach out to MDOT to see if there was anything we could do to color, to identify them as 30-minute, 15 or 30-minute parking spaces by coloring it. We haven't heard back from MDOT as to whether or not that's allowable or not, but just wanted to get impact if this is what you were looking for.
So would we be putting a sign at each of those particular spots?
Yeah, we would mark it, yes.
Why is there an orange dot on Cliffside? There's no parking down through there.
That's west, isn't it?
Where?
The third one, I think he's talking about.
Third one?
Second, or first?
First.
The first one is, that's in front of your block.
Yeah, because that's
That's
Broadway.
Main and Broadway, and then the next one's Main and Flat River.
So this is on,
Well,
yeah,
Yeah.
that's Broadway on Riverside.
If it will help Marty's business, I'll vote no.
And then when we went in front of Cliff's building, we just went across the street in the middle.
yeah.
And then when we got down towards past City Hall, in the middle of those buildings, and then we did also in the middle of where the all-weather seal was, and then in front of the Superior Building and Big Boiler, we just put one there. So I believe there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spots. 8 spots, I'm sorry, 8 spots.
But it's uniform, every block gets one of them.
Everyone, I would.
Individual businesses,
Nope.
and then a new business moves in and.
Right, we would put it, my suggestion, if you're gonna do it, put it in the middle.
Kind of falls nicely
Yeah.
in terms of the restaurants and takeout and the coffee shop.
Right.
And addresses the furniture concern.
And the feedback we got, that sounds like exactly what people were asking for.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good plan.
Do you wanna do 15 or 30 minutes? I guess that's, I mean, what would you, I mean, staff, 22 and a half?
Probably 15, you know. That way it's always open,
Okay.
right?
I just wonder if 15 is
Well, if
too
it's
short.
Well, it's still-
picking up food.
Yeah, it's
Right.
still 30 to 45 to enforce it.
That's true, that's true.
I think it'd be great if we could drive
Strike
them.
them.
That's what we're asking MDOT to see if we can do that.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've been driving up and down a lot on Main Street, and I think the 30 minutes is good, but there's an awful lot of open parking that I see during the daytime. So
Yeah.
even if somebody's there, I don't think it's gonna be a hassle of pulling in behind somebody that's outside that 30-minute spot. But
All right, any other questions for Mike?
Okay.
Motion to approve the shortened parking spots and then whatever time frame the motion or decides.
I make a motion to approve it with 15-minute parking.
Any other discussion? Sue?
Mayor DeVore,
Yes.
Councilmember Salzweedl,
yes.
Councilmember Yankovic.
Yes.
Councilmember Chambers.
Yes.
Councilmember Groves.
Yes.
All right. Dan, right-of-way permits.
Evening, Council and Mayor. After a recent discussion a week or two ago, we reviewed the right-of-way permit fees again. Currently, we have a two-tier system for right-of-way permits for work that takes place in the right-of-way by private property owners or contractors. We charge $50 for driveways or curb cuts, sidewalks, things like that, and everything else was $250. This larger amount was raised in 2022 because at that time we were experiencing a large increase in the amount of permits being submitted. We did not separate public utility work from all other work. After review of the permit fees, we're proposing to add a third tier now to the right-of-way permit fees. This work, for the work on water and sewer lines, we propose a fee of $150. This amount would cover the average cost of the city's work to review, process, and inspect any repairs or installations of these utilities. In reviewing what other public entities charge for the same type of utility permit, the cost has a large range to it. Some nearby entities charge anywhere from $50 in Hudsonville or $250, depending on where you're in the right of way at. East Grand Rapids is $100 and $200. Kalamazoo is $150 plus actual costs. Kentwood's $103, and then Ione County Road Commission is $100, $300. Kent County Road Commission is $100. And again, many of these same entities charge more for other work in the right of way, such as gas and telecommunications. In addition to this permit, currently under operations at the city here, for new construction, the city's right-of-way permit is in addition to any special assessment, capital charges, or water sewer connection fees that have been previously set. So this isn't anything to bypass that. So I just recommend that we have a 3-tier system, $50 for right-of-way access, curb cuts, driveway approaches, and sidewalks, $150 for work on city utilities, and $250 for all other franchise-type utilities.
Any questions for Dan?
I got one, Jessica.
Okay.
So Jessica, when Craig had a second point he brought up, and I know you looked into it, and I believe the way we do it is the correct way, correct?
Right, so I was not at that meeting, but I did look at the statute that I believe was referenced, and it applies to county roads. So, yep, the way you're doing it complies.
Okay.
Also, it also says right here, one of them was, Kalamazoo is 150 plus actual costs. I think the argument was that it had to be for only actual costs, and that's it. Great.
Greg Canfield, 403 North Washington. So the public act that I referenced does not apply to city?
Correct. I wasn't here, Greg, but that's
Right.
the one I looked at, applied
Sure.
to counties.
Is there a public act that covers cities or not?
So there's several different laws that apply. There's a right-of-way statute, and then there's just the Home Rule City Act. And there's some other things that give cities the general authority to regulate their local roads.
Sure, and I believe just from my years of permits for plumbing and mechanical and stuff, that permits are just supposed to cover the cost. Is that accurate or not?
It really depends on the context.
Okay. Do you have the public acts that I could look at to see what those were?
Not
Did you
on
reference?
me at the moment.
Okay, sure. Dan, for a public, or for a driveway permit, or a sidewalk, you go out first and look at those and bless it, and then look at forms before they pour them? And
Yes.
so there's multiple trips involved for that one? Probably 3. Once it's done, you go back and make sure the cement's done or properly. With these plumbing permits, when we're fixing a sewer line for somebody, I don't believe that there's a trip required up front. That it's
Sometimes there is.
generally we get them dug up and the guys show up and they take pictures of what's there just to reference in the future where things are. But it seems like most of the time those are a one-trip job. It just seems like we'd be more in the $50 range than the $150. Kent County, for their similar thing, they'll drive from, they're located down at Ann Street and 131, they'll drive 25, 30 miles out to the corners of the county where they have 30 minutes travel each way, and their fee is $100. So it just seems to me like 150 is hitting it a little hard.
I believe our fees are in line with what other communities are doing. I see his point, but we're not doing anything out of the ordinary. I don't see it.
Any other questions for Dan? Discussion on the fees? Motion to approve Dan's fee schedule recommendation?
motion.
Support.
Any other discussion? Sue?
Councilmember Salzweedl,
Yes.
Councilmember Yankovic,
Yes.
Councilmember Chambers,
Yes.
Councilmember Groves,
Yes.
and Mayor DeBoer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
One question for clarification is, if M21 and like Hudson Street are county roads, would it be acceptable to pull a permit with the county for those then instead of the city?
Usually the city permit if you're working in on our utilities in our right of way. And then being a county right of way, we still, sometimes in the past, they used to require one for each, but you probably get away with just one from the city for that and count the county utility. But if you're working on utilities, we're going to need a permit for that.
Okay. Thank you.
New business number 8, Lowell Pride closure.
The third annual Lowell Pride will be held on Saturday, June 3rd, 2023, on the Lowell Riverwalk. We've received a request from Board President Nicole Lenemuth regarding the closure of the north portion of the Oklahoma property, otherwise known as 216 North Monroe, on this date from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. This is the area where the parking spaces are. I do have it on a map for you, and I sketched it out. This is the same. This is what we approved last year. So I'm recommending closure is requested from 9 to 5 on June 3rd. And Nicole's here tonight if you have anything for her.
I do. Just following up, I showed up at one of your board meetings and expressed concerns about language on the stage and a particular vendor, just making sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always happy to hear feedback, and we have created guidelines for main stage for any of our acts that are on there, just to make sure that they're kind of meeting our standards as a board of what we're trying to be and improve. As for the vendors, we make sure that all of our vendors know that this is an open area that's open for everybody. We're not going to police what everybody brings and hope that parents and people have the best judgment of if they're going to let their kids run around. But as long as it's a legal item that's for sale in the state of Michigan, then we're just making sure that people are aware that this is an open area and that there may be people who don't like it. And if the people are not a fan of what that vendor is selling, then I would recommend that they continue moving on. But
Seems like a big answer. Well, what I'm referencing was there was a vendor selling pipes modeled after genitalia that was extremely realistic, and also the language on the stage, once it got past 4 or 5 o'clock, we don't allow that kind of stuff. We have 10 concerts a year and more. I've never heard anybody swearing at those, so
Wasn't that part of the outdoor comedy show thing too? It had to be, what am I trying to say?
clean.
Yeah,
I mean,
because it was open air.
obviously, anybody that knows me knows my language is peppered on the regular, but I don't get up on the showboat stage and show off my vocabulary. The other reason that I brought these concerns up is that we're promoting this event as family friendly, and as somebody with 4 grandkids under the age of 12, I didn't think the language and the pipes were family friendly. So those were my concerns. If you think you've dealt with them, cool.
When I did the comedy show during COVID, it was supposed to be a family-friendly thing, and both comics knew it. One decided to take a different path. We jerked him right off stage. I would like to think you're going to do the exact same thing.
we have our standards for our main stage people, and we've put it into guidelines for them. I think when it comes to using swear words or things like that, everybody has their own standards of what is or isn't appropriate for that, and as long as somebody isn't demeaning another person or using their language to be harmful or hateful, then that's what we ask of our people. when it comes to pride events and things like that, family friendly is something that, again, is defined differently by everybody, and anybody who is uncomfortable by, you know, the vendors that we have or what's happening on the main stage, and they're welcome to give us feedback. We ask for feedback from all of our vendors, from all of our attendees and all of that, and we gather that every year, and we take all of that into consideration when we do our planning.
Which is why I brought it up this evening, because when I expressed my concern, I left the meeting figuring this is going to get dusted off. The problem is, if you were having if you rented the old theater and it's enclosed, then say whatever epithets you want to say. But when you're on a public stage owned by the city, and maybe I'm missing something here legally, but we don't let that kind of language go on the other events. And I don't know why we should. We have an amplification system there that I think Salzwedel can hear it at his house. I can certainly hear him at my house. And when they're up there dropping every swear word there is, I don't think it should happen on our stage.
Here's my take on it. They're asking for a day permit. We can police it again this year. If we feel that it still isn't up to standards, there's no reason why next year we have these same conversations. They're going to do everything they can do to police it. Hopefully they do a great job, and it gets back, and it is a family-friendly experience, and it's a great day for everybody. And come back to it.
I get the argument that everybody's family-friendly definition is different, but there's some that are just blatantly obvious. Just blatantly obvious. And it's like, I just feel like you are being blown off asking a question.
I would also like to interject at this point that my little business has financially sponsored Pride and did so again this year. And so it's not like, and the other reason that I think we should exercise some caution is, as you well know, and all of us well know, there are a lot of people in town who are pissed off just by having it. We heard from a lady that doesn't even live here a few weeks ago. She was urging us to not even allow the event to happen. She didn't get a lot of traction here. That being said, I'm not comfortable with that kind of language coming off the stage, because it's a public stage outside broadcasting for blocks.
Well, that's kind of why I asked Nicole if she had a plan if somebody went off rail to get them off the stage. Apparently, you don't, or you're not going to, because...
We have an MC this year who's the MC who's been doing Fallsburg Festival for the last, I don't know how many years, so he'll be the one who's doing all of the talking from the stage. We have our guidelines that all of our main stage performers understand that this is our standard and this is what we want and what our festival is going to be. If you have suggestions for other things that we could do that would alleviate your concerns, we're happy to take those into effect. But when it comes to the vendors portion of it, when it comes to that,
yeah, I'm not
short
talking
of
about the vendors.
inspecting every single item that's on every single table that every single vendor brings, there's no way anybody could control or police that. The vendor in question
I gotta disagree with you there.
is actually a store here in Lowell, so they are a part of our community. And
Well, as far as policing vendors, I've been involved at the Fallsburg Art Festival for years in various volunteer capacities, and I've seen Lorraine on 2 different occasions. They have a rule there that you have to, what you're selling, you have to produce. And I saw her on 2 different occasions send a vendor home on day number 2 because they found out that what they applied with and what they were actually selling were 2 different things. They were not made by an artist, they were there selling mass-produced items. One was baskets and one, my point being that that is not an extraordinary burden, but if you don't want to have rules about it in the first place, that's a different subject.
Yeah, and the whole thing with the people on the stage too, Nicole, is when they're doing that and the way the speakers are, I mean, I can hear it way over at my house, right?
it's not just offending the people that are in attendance. It may be offending people that didn't attend but now have to hear this, right, with family and their small children. So I would highly suggest that you come up with a way to get somebody off stage if they violate that in any way, shape, or form.
Well, she hasn't even said it's a guideline, she just said there is guidelines, Jessica.
Right, so several times now you've referred to guidelines and standards that your organization has, and I just want to point out that the city is the permitting agency, certainly is permitted to have its own guidelines and
Absolutely.
standards as well. And so I think that's something that we need to look at.
We're happy, if you guys have additional guidelines that you want to put on the permit application, we're happy to do so. We are doing on our part what we feel is right for us, which is providing guidelines for anybody who's on our stage of the conduct and things that we want to have. We've spoken with the person who was on the stage last year that is the problem, and we've addressed it, so.
Fair?
But my question would be, I'm hearing the guidelines, which I think is a good thing. My question is, has the group shared those guidelines with the council? I mean, the council, to me, should have, oh, these are your guidelines? Great. This is, but having your guidelines, I understand that, but not having, the council should have a copy of what those guidelines are.
Agreed.
Thank you. I would agree with that.
Well, and just to be clear, the council's guidelines would trump the organization.
But at least then we would have the satisfaction of knowing what guidelines that
Absolutely.
Nicole and the group are putting in place to,
Or maybe we need to spell it out on the application that use of the showboat stage, swearing doesn't work.
But I don't know what policies you currently have in place or what the process is that you use when you
Yeah.
license these.
For me, it's more, it's less about swearing on a stage, more about us hunkering down on, if we're going to have people applying for permits, we have to be clear on what we want to see when we're getting those applicants, right? We want a set of guidelines, if that's what we want, right? And I think that if that's something we want, then that's what we have to look forward to in the future and create. So when people do apply, we're ready to receive those guidelines and see if they're up to par with the city's guidelines and not. I don't think us not doing that is Nicole's problem right now, because we don't have that in place right now. I also wanted to speak on, I have been a huge part of the kids area at Pride for the past 2 years. One, if you are actually in the kids area, you can barely hear the stage because the children are ridiculously loud. Two, I've never had a moment of firm uncomfortableness from inappropriateness at Pride. I think the whole idea of having a Pride in our town, and per this year's theme, is we're glad to be your neighbor. And I don't think that if we're gonna start putting boundaries around what it means to be a good neighbor, we have to do that really, really carefully. And do I think that maybe that comes with restrictions on verbiage on stage? Sure. But right now, she's asking for a road closure for the event we've already given her space for. So that's where I stand.
I think just putting some wordage in the, because that is city property.
Yeah, I just don't, I don't appreciate coming for, and I understand the road closure and the Pride, and I'm incredibly supportive of Pride, and I'm glad we have
Been
one
more
here.
drag shows than
Anybody here?
anybody.
Anybody. I think it's awesome. I just think if you approach a board, especially a supportive one, and you don't even want to answer their questions, I get frustrated with that a little bit.
Which question did I not answer?
You're just saying you have guidelines.
Well,
but that's not like, Cliff asked you 2 direct questions, and you were just like, there's guidelines, but we don't have them.
I would have happily brought them if I had known that that was something that would be requested.
Did you feel blown off with that answer?
I just felt it was a political answer, like, you know. And I get it. I think Jim probably has the right approach. Let's go through with it, monitor it, and if we need to change our application process going forward.
My suggestion would be is maybe you just have, we come back with some sort of standard guidelines for any event, because I mean, it's not
Yeah.
just this event, I mean.
Well, it's never
let's-
come
Oh,
up
I'm
before.
not
Right.
asking you to single out anybody.
No.
No.
I'm
Yeah.
saying for city permitted events,
Mhm.
there should be clean and clear guidelines for everybody to follow, regardless of what it is.
Well, that's, yeah, I don't know how many showboat concerts I've been to in the 20 years they've been doing them, but I've never heard anybody swear on the stage. And so in my mind, that was like a given that an outdoor stage on city property is not where you exercise your vocabulary. And if we don't have it in writing, that's on us.
And not to mention, anybody who's against it is gonna take anything like that as fuel to their delusional point.
Well, I
You know what I
guess-
mean? Like,
Right.
Just because it's on a city state, that doesn't mean you don't have a freedom of speech.
100%.
And so you also have to be somewhat respectful of that too, so I just want to, that we don't go to one extreme over the other.
Yeah.
Can we-
Keep it clear.
Can we ask that anyone on the public stage
Yeah,
not
so-
swear?
So of course, to Jim's point, it's constitutional issues, right, arise, and we're well aware of those, and there's a fine line there. But does that mean that anyone can do anything that they want without limit in a public forum? Absolutely not. So, and of course, any sort of guidelines that you would develop would be applicable uniformly. That is the reason that you have policies and guidelines, so that everybody gets treated the same.
We've happily followed any policies you guys have had so far, and we will happily continue to do so in the future.
Susan Stevens, 610 North Jefferson. I can hear that stage clearly at my house. There's an 18-month-old grandchild that's often in the yard behind me. There's an 8-year-old little girl who's jumping on her trampoline regularly in the yard kitty corner behind me. There's a 7-year-old girl right next door at her father's house. They can hear that language, and they're not attending the event. That's a problem. I love sitting on my porch listening to the concerts and the other things that go on downtown. It's great. But we need, I'm really irritated at the political smarmy response. Well, everybody has a different standard. Swearing is a sign of poor vocabulary. Standard needs to be fix your vocabulary so that you can come up with words that aren't quite as shocking to the small ears that are hearing you in a public forum. And while you're working on those guidelines, I'd also like to see items for sale that are not sexually explicit added to that, because those kinds of that kind of merchandise that Cliff is describing shouldn't be on our Riverwalk in a public park. That's a public park, and people are selling it there. That bothers me a lot. Have a Pride event. I was down there last year. It was a great event. It was a great atmosphere. Those kinds of things were not needed to make it a great atmosphere. And this one behind me should be saying, no, that's not acceptable for a family event. But instead, you get this political statement. There's a better way to do things. There's a better way to present yourself. And we don't need to hear that in a public stage.
And on the subject of the volume from the stage, number one, John has been improving the sound system every year, and that's why you can hear it for a long distance, because he's getting more and more powerful amplifiers. But also in that regard, that's why the sizzling concerts are shut down at 9 o'clock. Even if the crowd wants another encore or whatever, it's done at 9 because that's a cranking system.
Didn't we have a problem with the church group that was set up there?
Oh, on Sunday mornings?
Yeah.
Methodist, yes.
And they were allowed, and
Yeah,
I'm just saying that it carried so far.
we had an issue a few years ago. We had the Hispanic festival where, like, I live a mile away and the bass was thumping through my house at 10 o'clock at night.
Greg?
Craig Plunger, 827 North Washington Street. I'm kind of wearing my Wallaceburg Historical Society hat on this one, though. We were at Pride last year, and I was proud that we could be there. But as a historical society, we were expecting it. It was marketed as a family-friendly event, and we expected it to be a family-friendly event. It was brought to our attention, and I heard some of it too, that, you know, there was some language that was a little salty. And for Wallaceburg Historical Society's brand to be protected, I can't have our organization there this year until I see what happens this year. Personally, I mean, yes, I am proud that we have this event here. It means a lot to me. I want it to stay here, but I also want it to meet the standards that it promotes itself as and that represents our community. Thank you.
Craig Beecham, one last thing. It is a unique place that we have because it's on the river. And when you're talking about sound and everything, sound travels the river. At my house, the concerts, I can hear the concerts. I can actually, in the summer, I can hear the phones ringing at King Milling, traveling up the river. So it's a unique setting that makes the sound travel throughout the city much different than in other communities.
Hello, I'm Kelsey Krupp at 2156 G Drive. I just wanted to note that I have gone to these events. It's something that I was very, very happy when I moved here that they had these Pride events. It's something I look forward to. I think it's something that's really important and shows a lot about those values. Something to note too is that when I go, there's people of all ages there, and I don't think once I've ever seen someone uncomfortable or not having a good time. I think, like it was mentioned, you know, a lot of people look at things differently. In regards to like certain products, I don't know if I saw what was mentioned, but a lot of art does have certain body parts into it. The human body, you know, if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, you know, there might be other things there that maybe is making you uncomfortable. So that's just something to think about. And yeah, I'm really happy that this event happens. And if I know with swear words, I don't know if like different swear words mean different things to people or people use the language differently, but if that's something in the future that you want to note and have required, you know, when people use certain events, you might want to have like a list of certain words that you don't want seen, because, you know, I've been to other concerts where, you know, people use different language very differently and freely, and that means, you know, different things to certain people to a certain degree, I think. So if you're going to require it somewhere, definitely I think you should have it noted so people are prepared for that. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Would you like the city administration to come back with some sort of guidelines maybe for the next meeting?
And can you bring your guidelines too, so we have a copy of what?
I'll work with the city attorney to make sure, obviously, we're doing what we're supposed to, you know, we're in compliance.
Sure. I guess my problem lies in tonight on the agenda, it is Lowell Pride Road closure. So if they come back we come back with guidelines, like we're changing the guidelines when we've already given her the permit for this year. And what's on the agenda is the road closure. Are we gonna close the road for the event or not?
I agree with you there, and we need to take action on that. I agree.
Cliff asked a question, and this is all follow-up to the answer of that.
And I'm totally fine having conversation, I just,
Nobody's, yeah, I don't,
Has the permit already been granted then?
Yes.
I'm not clear on where we are.
Permit-
yeah, we're not
Yes.
looking to change their permit for
Permit's been
anything.
granted.
I agree with Leah 100%.
We're not looking,
But I'd have to look at the permit language, but I do think it does allow, I think if we need to make modifications to something, we have that right.
But I don't think we're gonna have time to vote on what those ordinance or changes are before the event on July 3rd.
no, that's not our intention. Our
At June
intention,
3rd.
No, I just think that, well, we can bring you something back as a guideline going forward.
So with that, I would make a motion to go ahead and close the streets for Lowell Pride here on June 3rd from 9 a.m. to 5.
I'll support.
any other discussion?
What street is it?
It's the parking lot.
It's
It's the High Street
High Street.
easement.
Just the
Oklahoma
parking lot
property.
portion of it. We don't actually close any of the streets. It's just the south side of the parking lot for vendors.
And the boat launch will be open.
Yep.
Sue?
Councilmember Yankovic,
Sure.
Councilmember Chambers,
Yes.
Councilmember Groves,
Yes.
Mayor DeVore,
Yes.
Councilmember Salzweedl.
Yes.
All right, we're setting the public hearing now for this year's budget. The public hearing will be presented during our regular council meeting on Monday, May 15th here. Copy of the budget is available on the website. Any comments on the public hearing for next?
Nope.
Okay. Boarding commissions, Cliff?
Historical district put in ask for $100K. The guy that writes the grant request screwed up and didn't submit one in December. I don't remember what his name was, but we got rid of him. So anyway, because we've got, I don't know if you're all aware of it or not, but Mr. Schlegel and his crew want to turn Larkin's into a restaurant with apartments above it. So he's looking for $40,000. We've got a couple other big requests in, so we're trying to get some money. That's all I got.
Jim?
Our board met, Williams and Works was there, Andy and the young lady, I can't remember her name right offhand, but talk about recommendations on what that ordinance or changes will be for that. So we're going to meet again on May 15th at 8 a.m. at the Lowell Power to see some more input from them and what other cities are doing. So I want to thank Dan and from DPW and Ryan from Lowell Power for also attending and Harry was here. So that's it for this.
I have DDA, I got notice today, DDA is canceled, and Fire Authority is next Thursday, I think, Marty?
Planning is next week, and I will bring it up at planning, Jim, to look into changing those different properties.
Leah?
Mine are coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Mike,
Nothing.
city manager's rate.
First, I want to congratulate Mayor DeVore, Mayor Pro Tem Chambers, and their graduations from the elected officials academy through the Michigan Municipal League. Mayor DeVore was graduated to level 2, and Mayor Pro Tem Chambers was level 1. So I just want to congratulate them. It's a lot of work to do that.